I'm Brett Angell, and I'm the Senior Exhibitions Preparator at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. I'm going to be speaking on one small portion of a very complicated exhibition called Casanova. I'll be focusing on the mount I designed and made for the chair that wouldn't fall over. We often talk about mounts for earthquake mitigation, vibration, safety, and security, but we seldom talk about mounts for theatrics. So I thought it would be a fun little change-up for a truly unique exhibition. Casanova was essentially the brainchild of C.D. Dickerson, formerly of the Kimbell in Fort Worth, now at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. He created the original proposal and checklist. The MFA has substantial holdings of decorative arts, furniture, accessories, clothing, and costumes, and so he essentially became a partner. This exhibition traveled to the Kimbell first, then the Legion of Honor in San Francisco, and finally the MFA in Boston, and this happened between 2017 and 2018. In addition to C.D. Dickerson, there was also a revolving cast of curators that came and went for various reasons during the planning stages of this exhibition. They include George Shackelford, Frederick Ilkman, Esther Bell, Tom Mickey, Pam Parmel, and Courtney Harris. The exhibition focused on the exploits of Giacomo Casanova through artwork and art holdings. There were essentially three scenes that the exhibition was designed around. I'm focusing on the London card-playing scene. The player is caught cheating, and the opponent has leapt up in protest. Because of the complicated nature of the scenes, the designer and curators thought it would be best to use live volunteers to stage each scene. This way, specific poses, mannequin types needed, furniture, costumes, and accessories could all be determined rather simply. This is definitely the first time I've ever had living props for a mock-up, so it was quite a unique experience for me. These were the poses that were eventually agreed upon. You can see on the right the chair in question, which is what we're talking about here. You also notice Frederick's hand holding the chair as if it were tipping over. This is where the idea of the chair tipping over began. Frederick asked if we might be able to make something that could support the chair in a frozen position of tipping over. I said, yeah, sure. And so it began. The chair itself is English from about 1755 to 1765. It's made of mahogany and beech, and the upholstery on the slip seat is modern, so this was an ideal candidate. The mount itself is actually quite simple because the weight of the chair is essentially being supported on the floor. The mount just has to hold the chair back at the desired angle. So here you see the design I came up with. The mount could be made of brass because it wouldn't be supporting a ton of weight. You can see the large floor plate gets screwed into the deck, which would be plywood at all the venues. From the plate, the main support runs up the front side of the back leg of the chair. From there, a smaller support runs under the chair rail. Here you see the mount and chair together, mocked up in the shop. I've circled the capture clip. This is mechanically attached to the support under the chair rail. The clamp's around the rail, locking it onto the mount itself. All this fussiness is away from the viewer's sight and in the back. One venue was in San Francisco, so it's critical to have some type of earthquake-resistant mount. There was one small quake while the exhibition was installed, and I'm happy to say that everything, including the chair, fared very well. Here you have another view from the viewer's vantage point. Again, mocked up in the shop. You can see the large mock-up board that we used. Here's one more view. As you can see, even before the mount got painted, it's more or less naturally hidden by the design of the chair itself. In retrospect, it would have been wise for me to put a second lockdown clip on the front position of the mount too. That would have put much less stress on the object as the chair twists and turns in an earthquake, but it can be easily modified if the mount were to be used again for another exhibition. This is a shot of the installation at the Kimbell, which was the first venue. It's still not completely finished here. You can see a protective cloth underneath the female mannequin, And also the poses of the male mannequins were adjusted slightly to help animate them a little bit more. This is a shot of the installation at the Legion of Honor. It's essentially the same design, the same background, the same arrangement of materials. The only difference really here is that the floor is now dark gray instead of light. And this is the installation at the MFA in Boston. The two windows are actually LED screens showing rain dripping down as if it's raining outside. So quite appropriate for London. There's also a screen in the fireplace, which is hard to see in this image, with animated fire as well. And then also we had audio of the card players arguing with each other. So there's been some criticism about these editions as being kind of over the top, and while it may or may not be, it was certainly fun to work on this exhibition with all these unusual ideas.
Thank you, Brett. That was fabulous. So let's get on to some questions. I'm going to pass this along to Samantha.
Thank you. Hi, Brett. That was fantastic. I absolutely love the theatrics and the living props. That was just fabulous.
It's very unusual for me as well.
Yeah. Do you want to talk to us a little bit more about that process? I think, like from a mount maker's perspective, working in that way is quite different. Do you want to give us some more insight about that?
I think Keith Crippen, our designer, and Frederick Ilkman, who is our main curator at the MFA for this project, I think were trying to decide how would we envision this complicated process with all these multiple figures and multiple things going on in each scene. And so I can't recall which person exactly came up with the idea, but together they decided, why don't we just use some of our volunteers and interns in the office? And of course they were thrilled to be able to participate. And it really just helped us to focus our ideas, like I said, not only for the poses, but what kind of accessories might be needed, what kind of decorative objects could be added into the scene as well. And in one of the other scenes, they even, which we didn't talk about here, but in one of the, I believe it was the Italian scene, they even had a kind of a huge skirt mocked up on one of the volunteers too, just so we could get an idea of the girth as she was in the space, so that we could decide where the furniture was going to be arranged. So it was pretty complicated. And so I think that having the actual live people being the stand-ins was really beneficial.
Yeah, I think it's just incredible. And from your perspective, were there any sort of frustrations or challenges, I guess, around that, rather than sort of normally a static object that you might be presented with, this kind of backwards and forwards? Was there any sort of challenges there for you?
The chair itself actually was quite a simple design, and the idea was pretty simple, again, because luckily the chair itself, the weight of it was being supported by the floor. So that part was pretty easy. Some of the other parts that we're not talking about here, which would be an idea for a whole nother talk, but a lot of the mannequins, I don't know if you noticed, but have really extreme moves. So some of the arms are pushed up really close to each other. The mannequin over the table that had raised up, that was tipping the chair over, was bent over the table. And as you probably know, mannequins aren't made that way. So the mannequins actually had to be chopped apart. This again came from the process of having the live volunteers and the mock-ups. And so we were able to decide which mannequins needed to be cut apart. And then we used a contractor, Gerk Manninen, who works out of Cape Natick, Maine. And together we designed a steel armature system in the joints that would be adjustable. And so wherever those parts were cut apart, we're able to add those articulated joints and then be able to lock them down once they were in the desired position. So that was really the most complicated part, which of course no one would ever see.
Yeah, no, I love that. And so do you think were there any, as because it traveled around, were there challenges related to the mannequins or the mount or anything along the way?
No, after you get that first one, the most difficult installation is always the first one. So at the Fort Worth Museum, the Kimbell in Fort Worth, was probably the most difficult, just because it's your first time. And while everything was mocked up ahead of time, you know, when you're doing the first final installation, everything needs to be perfect and just so. And so the first installation was just difficult only because of that. And then each progressive exhibition after that got easier. So the Legion of Honor was a little bit quicker, a little bit easier, even though that was our earthquake zone. And then when it came to Boston, we pretty much were pros by then.
Amazing. Just to sort of wrap it up, are there any sort of tips and tricks out there for fellow mount makers and allied professionals around this project?
I think the biggest tip, especially for objects that are going in traveling exhibitions, are to have that flexibility. So I had mentioned the articulated moving joints and the mannequins. Those were all so that when we were in each venue, the curators and designers at each of those different institutions had a little bit of flexibility about how they wanted to arrange things, so they would have the opportunity to change the poses slightly. And so flexibility is always the key. If you can make a mount that's flexible, you just make it so much easier on yourself during the installation process.
Thank you so much, Brett. That was awesome, and congratulations.
Thank you. You're very welcome.
I'm going to hand back over to Jamie.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you, Brett. That was what a cool installation. I'm just blown away by it.